Good evening and welcome to Behind the Mystery, the show that separates fact from fiction and delves deeper into all of the world's mysteries. As you may have noticed, I am not joined by my usual co-host Miles. Unfortunately, he is unwell, so for today I'll be joined by Owen Trett. However, as usual, my name is Dave Richardson and this week's theme is the paranormal. We'll be looking into the disappearance of Eliza Lamb and the Enfield haunting.
And later on, another member of the audience will see how good they are as a forensic scientist. But before all of that, let's see a little bit of what to expect from today's show. Followed people around the house, and many more strange events. The Society for Psychical Research, one of the oldest paranormal investigative bodies in the world, sent out a professional by the name of Maurice Grosse at the request of the family, whom, after seeing things with his own eyes, was convinced that the house was indeed haunted.
The Society of Psychical Research were not so easy to convince, however. As November passed, a noticeable difference in Janet's behaviour became apparent to everyone, and though possession was not a word used by professionals, Maurice Grosse said it was as if something had taken over her. After many disturbances involving her behaviour, Janet began to growl and bark aggressively, allowing the investigator to theorise that if the spirit could make these noises, perhaps it could talk. They sat Janet down on the same chair that was moved to the downstairs of the house. When sat in the chair, Janet began to speak in the voice of an old man, later confirmed to be that of previous owner, Terry Wilkins.
Wilkins' father had lived in the Hodgson's home many years prior, but had died from a brain hemorrhage in his favourite chair, the very same chair that Janet had sat in. The voice that spoke through the little girl explained that as if it felt someone had had their hands around her neck. The investigators claimed to have Janet fill her mouth with water and then cover her mouth with tape to avoid any complications, then it may have been a hoax.
Later, Janet admitted that some of the occurrences were that of her own making, claiming that she was simply having some fun with the situation, though she still declares that all of the big occurrences were real. However, a magician by the name of Milbourne Christopher was called in to investigate and said there was no paranormal activity going on, just the antics of a very clever girl who wanted to cause trouble. Ventriloquist Ray Allen was also invited to investigate, and he concluded that the male voices being heard were nothing more than Janet's vocal tricks.
So, the question here is, was this paranormal activity real or a hoax? Or did these incidents simply stem from the boredom of a child?
Similar to the past few weeks, where we discussed the origins of the Mandela effect, a phenomenon that has become huge within media over the past few years. This week, we'll be discussing new theories that our viewers have spotted.
To start off with, who remembers everyone's favourite cheeky monkey, Curious George?
I do.
I bet you all remember him from swinging from tree to tree. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, but that simply isn't true. Curious George actually has no tail. So, why do people remember him with one?
If you take a close look at a Kit Kat wrapper, there is no dash between the two words, even though most people remember it that way. The same can be said for Coca-Cola. There never was a hyphen.
Keeping with the childhood classics, you may remember Disney's Mickey Mouse from his iconic show. What you may not know is that Mickey does not wear suspenders, but for some reason, everyone seems to remember him with them on. If you look at all the episodes, Mickey Mouse only has a pair of red shorts. Where did the suspenders go?
If you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, you'll probably know the famous quote, "Life is like a box of chocolates." Well, I hate to tell you, but the phrase in fact is life was like a box of chocolates, which has completely confused audiences. When you think about it, the sentence doesn't make much sense, but that's what they're written on the script. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's pretty great. I mean, lastly, if you rewatch Jaws, quite similar. You know, there was a really famous line which is, "We're gonna need a bigger boat."
Yeah, I know the line.
You know the line.
I know the line.
Actually, the line is, "You're gonna need a bigger boat."
That would make sense.
Yeah, it makes sense in the scene.
You know, the two guys talking and then one going, "Yeah, you need a bigger boat."
It's like in Star Wars, it's "No, I am your father."
Yeah, yeah.
not
I mean,
Luke.
this is one obviously we looked at a few weeks ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
With this situation as well. But, you know, there's so many lines in these. I mean, obviously with the box of chocolates line, and then with George with the Star Wars line, so many lines that you just think you know.
But you don't.
But you don't.
It's amazing.
You really don't know them. So, I wonder, did you fall for any of these misconceptions? Remember to tweet us at _BTM show and let us know of any other alternative memories you may have. Who knows? We may just read them out on the next show.
But up next, it's that time again. We're sending one of our viewers to attempt to deconstruct a crime scene that we've created with the help of our forensic team.
Yes. Am I okay to move? I picked up on what you said, but he cut in before I got a chance to.
Yeah, sorry.
Before I was able to do it.
A murder has occurred in a home, and we need some people to go there and take some evidence from the scene.
Hello and welcome back to this week's forensic segment. Once again we are back again with a new contestant to deconstruct today's crime scene. Now, you know how this works, so without further ado, let's get on with the show. So, joining us on this week we have... So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Yasmin and I'm 20.
Okay, Yas, under you come. Now...
Jesus Christ.
Okay, Yasmin, what are your first impressions of the scene?
Someone's been held under the water and drowned, or possibly suicide.
What do you think you can tell us about the victim?
It looks like a woman, judging from like the shoes and what they're wearing.
So, to start identifying who the assailant could have been, when you start putting in profiles, what kind of person do you think could have done this?
Someone a lot stronger than the victim, as she's been forcibly put in the bath. Possibly someone she knows, as it's in her house, that she might have let them in.
Okay, yeah, so now you've had a look at everything and you've sort of evaluated the whole scene. Do you think you can run through what you think exactly happened?
So I think there must have been some sort of argument and then it's turned into a physical altercation and then someone's drowned her in the bathtub.
Okay, so that's a very good observation you made there. So let's run through what actually happened. Now you're right in thinking the victim was drowned by someone more stronger than them. And because there's no breaking in points or entry points, we can safely assume that it's someone they knew. In this case, our strongest lead is her partner, who co-shared the flat with her, who has not been seen since. So, in this case, we can safely assume that the assailant is her male partner. You've identified the crime, but how do you think we'd go forward with this? How do you think we'd find out who might have done this?
Maybe start by dusting the room for fingerprints. You could also speak to the residents of the house or building. Any DNA that's left behind, hair or anything.
So this is where our job on the scene ends, and we hand over to the guys where they release the profile and start building a case against the assailant. So this is where our time ends. How did you find it today?
I really enjoyed it, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. So, that is all for us today on the forensic segment. Tune in next week for a brand new crime scene to deconstruct. Don't forget to tweet us at _BTM show for your chance to be on next week's show. That's all from me. Goodbye.
So next up, the story of a 21-year-old Canadian student who had a manic episode that led to an accidental drowning.
Eliza Lamb was reported missing at the beginning of February 2013. Her disappearance was reported across the media and had begun to pick up steam around the middle of February when security footage of Lamb on an elevator was released. In the security footage, Lamb is seen stepping out of the elevator, getting back in, and speaking with someone outside in the hallway. The elevator appeared to be malfunctioning up until Lamb left, which is when it miraculously began to operate normally again.
5 days after the security footage was released, on February the 19th, 2013, Eliza's body was discovered inside the water tank on top of the Cecil Hotel. The residents of the Cecil began to complain about a slew of issues with their water. According to the residents and guests, the water pressure was very poor and the water was discoloured and foul-smelling as it ran from the taps. When they went to investigate, they found Eliza's body in the water tank on the roof. She was naked and her clothes were tossed in with her.
Well, the security footage immediately went viral, and people from all around the world proposed theories such as paranormal intervention and mental illness. The explanations came from the very crevice and corner of the internet and continued to do so for years after the case was considered solved. There have been many arguments that the footage was tampered with.
Eliza Lamb's death was ruled as accidental. In 2015, her parents attempted to sue the hotel. The wrongful death suit claimed that the hotel should cover the cost of her burial and unspecified damages. The case was dismissed after the hotel argued that there was no feasible way anyone could have known she would enter the tanks. And since no one has ever been able to prove how she did, they cannot be held liable.
Despite this mystery being considered solved, the case of Eliza's death is full of coincidences and weird details that do not seem to fit. Today, we are joined by Alex Jones to discuss the mysterious Eliza Lamb case.
Hi Alex, could you break us down on this conspiracy?
What I believe is that Eliza was either influenced by ghosts or she was believing that she was being influenced by ghosts. I think she had either a psychotic breakdown or she genuinely saw these ghosts in the hotel.
Okay, so we know for a fact that she obviously had bipolar. This is obviously people, at least, talking in her head. Do you think that this might be the reason behind it?
Yeah, I think maybe the other person she thought was being taken over by one of the ghosts in the hotel, because there have been so many serial killers there over the years that have come to light. I think that she definitely thought that one of herself was a ghost or being told to go to the roof and then jump in the water tank by a ghost.
Right, okay, right. So but before we carry on, Owen, this is obviously the time in the show where we like to join the mystery board. So we'd like to go over and
Definitely.
take the mystery board. Okay, so Eliza Lamb's body was obviously found in this water tank.
Yes.
Now, as we know, the water tank, the lid of the water tank, very heavy.
Yeah.
So how are we saying that the lid was removed, her placed in it, naked obviously with the clothes next door, and then closed again?
Well, she didn't have to do it by herself. Maybe she had help from someone else. Maybe someone that she knew at the hotel that was willing to help her do this. Maybe she convinced them to the point that actually she was this person and that she needed to do what they were telling her to do, otherwise she wouldn't be able to cope.
So what you're saying is that another person might have been involved in this, and yet since 2013 they've kept stum.
Potentially, maybe they felt this admiration for Eliza, that she was doing what she thought was right and they were just loyal to her.
I mean, surely this would have to be someone who works in the hotel, because to get to the roof, we know that it was very difficult to get to the roof unless you were a member of the hotel staff. So are we saying that possibly as a hotel member of staff, that she's sort of coerced in your belief?
Well, obviously it's a theory, but potentially it might not have been someone from the staff. It could have been anyone trying to help her. Maybe forceful entry onto the roof by anything. There was a fire escape, I believe, that she could have climbed up to get in there. So that could also potentially have been a cause as to how they could have got onto the roof in the first place.
Okay, so I mean, when they checked the body, they obviously found that she was naked, and obviously she'd been there a while and had started to decompose, unfortunately. But I know for a fact they found blood in her rectum, which could obviously shouted towards more of a physical crime, and possibly a rape. But that was never obviously decided by the people to check on this in the autopsy. So do you think that the people who exhumed the body and were doing the autopsy on it were automatically starting to believe that paranormal activity was involved in this?
I think in their sort of profession, they don't believe in paranormal activity. I think they believe that that the victim has either committed suicide or someone's murdered them. So I think the fact that they dismissed it is quite suspicious, considering that was probably one of the only pieces of evidence of foul play in the death of Eliza Lamb. I just think that it's very suspicious that they just dismissed it like it was nothing in the autopsy.
Right, because I mean, my personal approach on this is very different to yours. I believe that there was a crime committed here, murder, involving more than one person, I feel, and there is a cover-up going on here. What do you think of my theory on that?
I think that could potentially be the case. I mean, obviously we don't have any sort of light on the situation. We don't have a truth behind it. So your theory could potentially be right. In the elevator, we see her talking to someone on the outside. So she could potentially have been talking to someone that was out of view, that was a blind spot that we couldn't see.
Because the camera angles obviously are very poor. If you haven't seen the footage before, the lady, obviously Eliza Lamb in this case, she runs into the lift, and then she runs out of the lift, looks around the corner, and then hides, as we know.
Yes.
And then the lift starts to work again after she has a conversation out the side. But the cameras don't really show us everything. There's obviously talk that there's a possibility that the cameras were edited. There's obviously that theory as well.
Yeah, I mean, the cameras definitely could have been cut. This could be a huge cover-up for all we know. Maybe she was doing something that she wasn't meant to be, and then the wrong or right people had to silence her for it. We won't know.
No.
But the camera footage showed that she was talking to someone, or she was trying to gesture something to someone with her hands.
Yes.
almost
Very much
inhuman
so.
behaviour,
So.
you could suggest.
Unfortunately, that is all we have time for. Thank you so much for joining us today,
all right.
Alex. You made some really interesting points. Some good points on the board as well.
So, what do you think? Was Eliza Lamb's death a tragic incident, or is there a more paranormal element to this case? Tweet us at BTM Show to let us know your thoughts. Moving on, this week's theme is centered around the paranormal, alongside mysteries and conspiracies we've spoken about today. Here are some other ones that we just can't wrap our heads around. First off, we're going back to the end of the Second World War. The Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, claimed that during a visit to the White House, he experienced a paranormal visit of some sorts, none other than Abraham Lincoln. The Prime Minister, who was at the time fresh out of the bath, apparently addressed the spectre, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have me at quite a disadvantage," to which the spirit simply smiled and vanished. Interestingly, Churchill wasn't the only great mind to believe in the paranormal. Others include famed author Arthur Conan Doyle, the mind behind Sherlock Holmes, as well as Alan Turing, the brilliant mathematician who decrypted the most seemingly impossible of codes created by the German government.
Right. Okay. Owen, 30 miles outside New York City. Okay. There is a house.
Okay.
It's known as the Amityville Horror House.
The Amityville Horror House.
Yep. It's the most haunted house supposedly in the country.
The most
in the world, possibly.
haunted. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. It's had numerous films named after it, but the main storyline behind it is this. Okay, 1974. Okay, November the 30th. Okay, man, 23 years old, by the name of Ronald J. Defoe, murders his whole entire family.
Jeez. Ooh.
That's his parents, four brothers and sisters.
That's mad.
It's crazy,
That's
isn't it?
crazy.
Right, goes to prison. Okay.
Right.
13 months later, house is sold, and it's bought by the Lutz family. Okay, the Lutz family, mum, dad, and son. Okay, they live in the house, but they only last 23 days.
23. That's insane. I guess because of like paranormal stuff that occurred.
Yeah,
Wow.
Big paranormal stuff, oozing from the walls, pig-like monsters, seeing them, knives falling from the kitchen, and his wife levitating.
Levitating.
Yeah, the priest is called in to try to check out the house.
As
he
you
says that go away is screamed at him by something. He demands never to go to that particular room in the house. People don't believe them. And to this day, the son is still having nightmares. All that years later. And the person who did the murders, Ronald, who's still alive now.
Really?
Yeah, still alive now. said that he heard spirits tell him to kill his family.
Well, that's pretty crazy, right there. That's pretty that's pretty bone chilling. Who knew there was so much about who knew there was so much suspicious activity taking place in the world? Hopefully, we'll get some answers to them one day. Well, that's all we have time for on theme theories. But before we wrap up, let's have a look at what you guys had to say about our previous episode.
Last episode, we spoke about disappearances, and we asked you what your opinions were on our Twitter. Let's take a look at see what you have to say for yourselves.
At Carly61546 says, loving the show, so glad it's back on this week. Can you do something about Area 51, please?
Oh, Area 51. Now, this is obviously something that I spoke to Miles about a few weeks ago. It was mentioned by, I think it was by Ben Telby actually mentioned it about the show.
Definitely good.
Yeah, it should be good. We've got at Country Mary 1997, Eliza Lamb was bipolar. That story really made me feel uneasy. Hashtag spooky.
It's probably the scariest thing I've seen on the show.
What the hashtag?
All right. At Real Believer Prophet 22 says, wow, the show is amazing. When will you talk about space mysteries?
Well, agreed. It is amazing, the show, but then
Yes.
I am biased. And space mysteries, I think maybe next week.
I think that's next week.
It might be next week. It might be next week.
Looking forward to that.
It should be good. It should be good. And at Arctic Billy, Endgame, nah, it's all about Behind the Mystery. You're right, it is. It's all about Behind the Mystery. It is a marvel in its own right.
I think this person definitely has their priorities in order.
They do indeed.
100%. Wow, yeah, those were some really great tweets.
And if you want the chance to voice your opinions and share your theories, then make sure you message us on Twitter and Instagram.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. What's your favourite part of the show? Let us know by sharing your thoughts on Twitter, and don't forget to tweet us @_BTM show. And if you can't wait until next week, take a look at our Instagram to see some exclusive behind the scenes of the making of the show.
Now, that's it for today. We will see you next time, where we'll be discussing the mysteries of space. And as always, we will bring you a new crime scene to try and investigate. Thank you, Owen, for stepping in. And next week, we hope Miles will be back and even more ready for another mystery to solve. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.
Goodbye.